Hi, I'm Kim, and this is Kim's Corner, where I get to share some thoughts about what we're working on as well as things that inspire me. Please be sure to click the subscribe button to get notice of new videos, and hey, leave a comment and let me know what you think. Hi y'all, I wanted to tell you about my dry erase board. Okay, I know dry erase board doesn't sound real exciting, but for the last 13 plus years, this board has been pretty important to me. It's 4 feet by 4 feet, so it's a large size, and it's got things like grocery list, prayer list, things to do. But the thing that covers the most part of that board are different sayings and quotes, and some of them I've heard, some of them I've read, and some of them I made up myself. And I was looking at that board today, and there was one quote that really stood out to me, and it said, "Thank you, Lord, for the things that you give us that are exactly what we need, but what we would never want." So I started thinking about what are some of the things that God has given me that I would never want, but they're exactly what I needed. And the first thing that came to mind was this situation that I was in for several years. It was a very toxic situation, and I became so uncomfortable in that I finally had to do something. And I realized much later that that was a gift that God had given me. If I hadn't have been so uncomfortable, I would have just stayed there in that situation and done a lot of damage to myself and others involved. And so as hard as it was to make the changes that I made, really hard, that was the best thing I could have done. And that was a gift that God had given me. But sometimes the gifts that we're given, the things that happen to us that we would never want, but they're exactly what we need, they have very little to do with us and a whole lot more to do with other people. And actually, the place that I'm living right now is a beautiful example of this. I bought this place in February of 2020, and the whole transaction occurred very quickly in less than 3 weeks, which I'm told rarely happens like that. But I moved in the first week of February, and what I didn't know until months later was that the husband of the couple that I bought this place from needed a kidney transplant. And he was able to get in and get his kidney transplant right before COVID shut so many things down. Everybody was getting sick. It was spreading like wildfire. He was able to get in the hospital and get that done. And by the way, cool story, his wife actually donated one of her kidneys to him. There's also a young woman that lives around the corner, and she recently lost her father. Well, the first time she came here, we were talking, and I realized she hasn't given herself permission to grieve. And so we had some conversation that opened the doorway for her to really release some emotion that had been pent up. And it was basically the beginning of her really walking through the grieving process. And she's done some amazing things with that she's been able to help other people. But if I hadn't have been living here where I am right now, that wouldn't have happened. And I'm not saying that it's because of anything that I did. It's because I was in this position that God put me in, and He was able to work through me. And it was a precious thing that happened. All because I am not where I would have chosen. It's not what I would have wanted. But God knew exactly where I needed to be. I'm in this Bible study right now, and we've been studying Joseph for several weeks in the book of Genesis. And boy, you talk about if there's anybody who is getting what they don't want, but exactly what they need, Joseph would be the poster child for this. He is his father's favorite son, and then his brothers sell him into slavery and tell his father that he's dead. He goes to Egypt as a slave and rises to work for Potiphar, and Potiphar puts him in charge of everything in his home. And then Joseph gets thrown back into prison. Then he becomes in charge of everything at the prison because he's doing such a good job, but he's still in prison. And then he ends up second in command over all of Egypt. It's a crazy story. But even though Joseph had all of these things that we would think we would never want, they're terrible things that happened to him, and they were terrible, but they all had purpose, and God put all of those things into play and used those so that Joseph could become second in command, so that he was under Pharaoh himself. And there's a whole lot more to this story, but I just wanted to use that as an example because he just kept fighting and doing the right thing and not letting his circumstances and his situations bring him down, make him bitter, make him angry. He didn't understand what God was doing. How can we possibly understand what God was doing? Every now and then we may get a little insight, and that's great, but usually we don't know. But it comes down to, are we going to trust him or are we not going to trust him? Because he does know best. I was thinking about Garth Brooks' song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers, and it really kind of tied in with this whole concept. And I have to say, I love that song, but I don't necessarily agree with it because I think God answers every prayer. It's just that sometimes his answer's no. Sometimes his answer's not what we want. But that doesn't mean that he's not giving us exactly what we need. I just wanted to share that with you, and I thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day.